He had always been drawn to music in ways that were hard to explain. From a very young age, the smallest sound, a gentle hum, or a quiet rhythm, caught his attention and filled him with wonder. Living in a modest neighborhood, he did not have access to many instruments. Most of the time, he listened to music through old radios or videos that his friends shared, dreaming of the day he could create sounds of his own. The piano, in particular, had always fascinated him. Its smooth black and white keys seemed like a path to another world, a place where stories could be told without words, where emotions could be expressed with a simple touch. One afternoon, he discovered a small community hall where a grand piano sat in the corner of the room. The instrument gleamed in the soft sunlight streaming through the tall windows, its polished surface reflecting the light like a mirror. His heart raced at the sight of it. He approached cautiously, hands shaking slightly, imagining what it would feel like to touch the keys. The piano was large, elegant, and intimidating, but to him it was a gateway to something magical. He reached out, but just as his fingers hovered above the first key, a stern voice interrupted him. The caretaker of the hall shook his head firmly. "You cannot touch it," he said. "It is very delicate and only trained people are allowed to play." The boy felt a twinge of disappointment, but he could not tear his eyes away from the piano. He asked politely again and again, each time hoping for a different answer. Each time, the caretaker refused. He tried to explain how much he loved music, how he wanted to learn, but the words seemed small compared to the barrier in front of him. Days passed, but the piano remained just out of reach. Every time he walked past the hall, he paused to look at it, imagining the melodies that could come from it. He began to dream while he walked, tapping invisible keys on the sidewalks, letting his fingers dance in the air. He remembered tunes from old recordings and tried to replicate them in his mind, thinking of how they would sound if only he could touch the piano. At home, he could only hum softly or bang gently on a small wooden table, pretending it was the piano. His family watched with quiet amusement, seeing the intensity in his eyes when he played, even if it was only imaginary. They did not fully understand the depth of his passion, but they noticed how happy it made him, and they encouraged him in small ways. Sometimes they found old books with music notes or shared stories about famous pianists, hoping to nurture his love for the art. He continued to plead with the caretaker, each time more desperate than before. He promised to be careful, to clean the keys, to do anything that would earn the chance to play. But each promise met the same refusal. It was as though the piano had been placed behind an invisible wall, one he could see and touch but never pass through. He felt frustration and longing, but he refused to give up. The piano became his secret world, a silent friend he visited in his imagination every day. One rainy afternoon, he stayed after school and watched as another child was allowed to play a small tune on the piano. He listened closely, observing every movement, every finger placement. He noticed how the other child's hands moved with confidence, how the music seemed to flow effortlessly. He felt a mixture of admiration and envy, wishing that could be him, wishing he could feel the keys under his own fingers. He decided to remember everything, every movement, every sound, so that one day he could play just like that. He also began to notice the little details around the piano that most people ignored. The way the light caught the edges of the keys, the faint scent of polish and wood, the soft hum of the room when it was quiet. To him, every detail mattered. He felt connected to the instrument in a way that went beyond sound. It was as if the piano understood him, waiting silently for the day he would be ready to meet it halfway. His persistence started to shape him in small ways. He learned patience, sitting quietly, watching, and waiting for the right moment. He learned to observe carefully, noticing tiny movements, small techniques, and subtle expressions of sound. He developed a deeper appreciation for music, understanding that it was not just about pressing keys, but about feeling, listening, and expressing emotions. Even without touching the piano, he grew as a young musician, learning in his mind and heart what he could not yet do with his hands. One afternoon, a friendly voice spoke to him, noticing his constant presence at the hall. A teacher, who often volunteered at the community center, approached him gently. "You really love music, don't you?" she asked. He nodded eagerly, explaining his fascination with the piano and his desire to play. She listened carefully without judgment and smiled. "It's rare to see such passion. Keep practicing, keep learning, and one day you might just get your chance." Her words gave him hope, a small flame that burned brighter with every visit. Even as the days turned into weeks, and weeks into months, he never lost sight of his goal. Every trip past the community hall, every glimpse of the piano, reminded him of what he was working towards. He drew imaginary notes in his notebook, hummed melodies while doing chores, and imagined performing for an audience that only existed in his mind. The piano, though untouched, became the center of his dreams and the motivation for his persistence. He knew that patience was part of the journey, and each refusal, each moment of waiting, strengthened his desire to succeed. He started learning more about music theory from books and videos, understanding rhythms, scales, and chords. Even without a piano at home, he trained his ears, memorized songs, and developed an internal sense of timing. He was preparing silently, unseen by most, for the moment when the piano would finally be within his reach. The caretaker, while strict, began to notice his unwavering dedication. Though he never admitted it openly, there was a hint of respect in the way he watched the boy linger by the piano. The boy's love for music was not loud or disruptive. It was quiet, persistent, and genuine. That silent devotion started to create a subtle shift in the environment, a feeling that maybe, just maybe, this young boy deserved a chance. At home, he shared small pieces of music with his family, humming tunes or describing how he imagined playing them. They encouraged him, celebrated his progress, and listened with admiration. They became his first audience, supporting him in a way that mattered even without a stage or piano. Each note he imagined, each melody he practiced in his mind, brought him closer to the day he would finally touch the piano and let his fingers bring the music to life. By the time part one of his story ended, he was a boy full of hope, determination, and dreams. The piano had not yet been touched, but it had already transformed him. He had learned patience, observation, and deep love for music. He had discovered that sometimes the path to a dream is not straightforward, and that longing, persistence, and imagination could keep a passion alive even when the world says no. He waited, ready for the moment when his fingers would finally meet the keys, ready to turn his silent practice into something the world could hear. Even after weeks of watching and imagining, the boy did not stop thinking about the piano. Every day he returned to the community hall, hoping for a glimpse of the instrument and a chance to be closer to it. He had learned to wait patiently, to observe the way the sunlight fell on the keys, and to notice the smallest details he had missed before. His love for music had grown deeper, and he understood that the piano was more than just a collection of keys. It was a way to tell stories, to express emotions that words could never capture. He spent hours practicing in his mind, running through scales and melodies, imagining how his fingers would move across the keys. At home, he found small spaces where he could tap out rhythms on tables and chairs, pretending they were piano keys. The sound was not the same, but the feeling of movement, the rhythm of music, became a comfort to him. He would close his eyes and play in his imagination, letting the music guide him through feelings of joy, sadness, and hope. Sometimes, he would sit quietly in the corner of the hall while others played, listening carefully to the notes and the subtle differences between each touch of the key. He noticed how some people played with confidence, their fingers moving freely, while others hesitated, unsure of the path their music would take. He learned by observation, memorizing the movements, the pressure of the fingers, and the timing of each note. Even without touching the piano, he felt as if he were slowly becoming part of its world. One day, the boy met a teacher who volunteered at the community center. She had noticed him sitting quietly day after day, watching the piano, and she approached him with a warm smile. "You really love music, don't you?" she asked. The boy nodded eagerly, trying to explain the passion that had grown inside him. He spoke about the melodies he imagined, the rhythms he practiced in his mind, and the joy he felt just being near the piano. The teacher listened patiently, impressed by his dedication and the way he seemed to absorb every detail around him. The teacher began to offer small guidance, showing him simple exercises he could practice without a piano. She taught him about finger positions, rhythm patterns, and how to read music. The boy practiced diligently at home, using his imagination to recreate the sounds of the piano. Each evening, he would sit at his small table, tapping and humming, following the instructions the teacher had given him. Slowly, he began to feel more confident in his ability to translate his ideas into music, even without access to the instrument itself. Despite these small victories, the piano in the hall remained off-limits. The caretaker continued to refuse his requests to play, citing the delicate nature of the instrument. The boy felt disappointment and frustration, but he had learned to channel those feelings into determination. He reminded himself that patience was part of the journey and that every day spent learning, imagining, and observing brought him closer to the moment he would finally touch the keys. His friends at school began to notice his focus on music. While they played outside, he would hum tunes quietly, tapping rhythms on his desk or drawing music notes in his notebook. Some friends were curious, asking him to teach them what he knew, while others simply admired his dedication. He did not mind their questions or comments. He was content knowing that his love for music was growing stronger with each passing day. The boy also began to understand that music was not just about talent but about emotion and connection. He listened to recordings of famous pianists, trying to feel the story behind each note. He noticed how certain pieces could make him feel calm, excited, or even tearful. This deep understanding of emotion in music became a part of his own practice, as he imagined the feelings he would pour into the piano when the time came. He started keeping a small journal, writing down melodies he imagined and the emotions they represented. Each entry became a reflection of his growth, a record of his journey. He described the feelings that accompanied each tune, noting how he could express sadness, joy, or hope through the movement of his fingers, even if those fingers were only tapping on a table or dancing in the air. The journal became a private treasure, a map of his musical mind and heart. One afternoon, while he sat near the piano watching another child play, he noticed a small mistake in the music. The other child hesitated, and the boy felt a sudden urge to help, to correct the rhythm or note. He wanted to shout advice, but he stayed silent, knowing it was not his place. Instead, he studied the error carefully, understanding why it had happened and imagining how he would handle it if it were his own performance. Each observation became a lesson, sharpening his skills and deepening his understanding of the piano. He also began experimenting with his own compositions. Using his imagination and the exercises from the teacher, he created simple tunes, experimenting with rhythm, melody, and harmony. He would hum them quietly to himself, tapping them out on furniture at home, or writing them down in his journal. Even without a piano, he felt a sense of accomplishment, as though he was building a bridge between his imagination and the instrument he longed to touch. Sometimes he felt lonely in his pursuit. Other children played games, ran through the streets, and enjoyed carefree moments that seemed far removed from his intense focus on music. Yet he never felt regret. He knew that the time spent imagining and practicing, waiting patiently, was shaping him into the musician he wanted to become. The piano was more than an instrument. It was a promise of future expression, a companion that waited silently for his arrival. The teacher continued to encourage him, praising his progress and dedication. She reminded him that many great musicians had faced obstacles and that perseverance often led to the most rewarding moments. Her words strengthened his resolve, and he took them to heart. He practiced harder, listened more carefully, and allowed himself to dream bigger than ever before. Each day became a step toward the moment when he would finally touch the piano and make it sing. One evening, as he walked past the hall, he noticed the caretaker looking at him differently. There was a faint recognition in his eyes, a subtle acknowledgement of the boy's persistence and love for music. The boy felt a glimmer of hope. Perhaps the refusal was not permanent. Perhaps, with patience and proof of his dedication, he might earn the chance to play. This thought filled him with renewed energy. and he resolved to continue learning, observing, and imagining with all his heart. Even without the piano, he was growing as a musician. His fingers, trained on tables and in the air, had developed strength and dexterity. His mind, filled with music theory and melodies, was sharper and more creative. His heart, full of emotion, understood the language of music in ways that went beyond technique. He realized that the journey itself was teaching him lessons he might never have learned if the piano had been easily accessible. By the end of part 2, the boy had become a young musician in every sense except one. He still had not touched the piano. Yet, the weeks of persistence, observation, imagination, and practice had transformed him. He had discovered that love for music was not just about playing an instrument but about feeling it deeply, understanding it completely, and preparing patiently for the moment when the world would finally hear the marvels he had been creating in his mind. He waited, determined and hopeful, for the day when his fingers would meet the keys and the music inside him could finally escape into the world. The boy had waited for this moment for what felt like forever. Every day, every hour of practice, every moment spent imagining the keys had led to this. That afternoon, the caretaker finally looked at him and said something he had been dreaming of. "You may sit at the piano for a few minutes." His heart leaped, and he could hardly believe the words. He approached the grand instrument with careful steps, feeling as if he were entering a sacred space. He sat on the bench, hands trembling slightly. The polished wood gleamed under the sunlight, and the black and white keys seemed to whisper promises of music yet to be played. He took a deep breath, reminding himself of everything he had learned, everything he had imagined. He placed his fingers above the keys, hesitant at first, almost afraid to touch them. But then, slowly, he pressed the first key. A note rang out, simple but beautiful, and a shiver ran through him. It was more than sound. It was as if the piano recognized him, welcomed him after all the waiting and longing. He started with small notes, cautious, careful, making sure not to make a mistake. Each sound was magical, confirming that all his preparation had not been in vain. The caretaker watched quietly, surprised at how naturally his fingers moved. There was a rhythm, a flow, a feeling behind each note. Even though he had never touched a real piano before, his imagination and practice had guided him, and now it seemed as if the music had been waiting for him all along. As he gained confidence, his fingers moved faster, exploring the keys more freely. He discovered the joy of creating melodies, the excitement of seeing how different notes could come together to tell a story. He remembered the exercises the teacher had given him, the patterns he had practiced in his mind, and now he applied them. The sounds were sometimes imperfect, sometimes hesitant, but every note was filled with emotion and intention. He was not just playing, he was communicating. He closed his eyes for a moment, letting the music flow naturally from his fingers. Each melody told a part of his journey. The longing, the patience, the countless hours of imagining the piano. He felt a sense of freedom he had never known. The room seemed to disappear, leaving only him and the instrument, the music stretching out into the quiet air. It was as if the piano had been waiting for him to unlock its voice, and now it could finally speak through him. The caretaker, who had been skeptical, could not help but smile. He had seen many children approach the piano, but this boy's connection was extraordinary. There was a subtle brilliance in his touch, a natural understanding that went beyond technique. It was clear that this was not simply a child learning an instrument. It was a young musician bringing life to the piano for the first time. The boy's mind was alive with ideas. He experimented with rhythms and melodies, blending simple notes into patterns that sounded surprisingly complex. He felt a sense of creation, of inventing something that had never existed before. The piano responded to his imagination, each key a partner in the music he was shaping. Even mistakes became part of the journey, guiding him toward new discoveries, showing him that music was as much about exploration as it was about precision. Time seemed to fly. The few minutes he had been allowed stretched, and yet he did not notice. He was fully immersed, absorbed in the music he had dreamed of creating for so long. Every note brought satisfaction, every combination of keys a revelation. His heart swelled with joy and accomplishment, realizing that all his waiting and preparation had led to this exact moment. It was everything he had imagined and more. He began to play small melodies he had created in his mind. Each one had a story, each note a reflection of his feelings. He felt as though he were speaking through the piano, expressing emotions that had been trapped inside him for months. The melodies rose and fell, soft and gentle at times, bold and lively at others. The room seemed to vibrate with the energy of his music, and for the first time, he felt fully connected to the world of sound he had longed for. As he played, he remembered the teacher's advice: to let the music flow naturally, to allow emotion to guide the fingers. He tried not to overthink, to trust his instincts. The result was a mixture of careful practice and spontaneous creativity. Each note carried intention and feeling, forming a story that was entirely his own. He felt proud, not because he had mastered the piano, but because he had finally been able to bring to life the music he had carried in his heart for so long. He experimented with different combinations of keys, discovering how certain notes could create happiness, tension, or calm. He felt like a painter with a palette of colors, choosing which sounds would create the picture he imagined. The piano was not just an instrument anymore. It was a voice, a companion, a storyteller. It responded to him, guiding his fingers and rewarding his curiosity with beautiful, unexpected harmonies. The caretaker eventually spoke, breaking the quiet. "You have a natural gift," he said quietly, almost in disbelief. The boy paused, looking up, surprised by the compliment. It was the first recognition he had received from someone who had once denied him the piano. The words warmed him, giving him confidence and a sense of validation. He knew he was just beginning, but for the first time, he felt that he truly belonged in the world of music. The boy's fingers moved instinctively, exploring the lower keys, then the higher ones. He experimented with volume, pressing softly to create delicate sounds and more firmly for powerful notes. Each variation brought new emotions, new discoveries. He realized that music was alive, changing with each touch, each pause, each subtle movement. He felt like he was learning not just the instrument, but the very language of music itself. In those precious minutes, he discovered the thrill of improvisation. He combined melodies he had practiced with new ideas that came to him in the moment. Sometimes the music surprised him, creating sounds he had never imagined. He laughed quietly at the joy of discovery, feeling free and unburdened. It was a magical moment, one that would remain in his memory forever. The first time his imagination had truly transformed into real sound. When the caretaker gently reminded him that his time was almost over, he reluctantly lifted his hands. The music lingered in the air, echoing softly, and he felt a deep sense of accomplishment. He had touched the piano, brought life to it, and discovered the joy of creation. It was a moment he would carry with him, a milestone in a journey that had started with longing and imagination. As he stepped away, the boy felt a renewed sense of determination. He knew this was just the beginning. There were so many melodies to create, so many lessons to learn, so much music inside him waiting to escape. He realized that the piano was no longer an object of longing but a partner in his growth, a medium through which he could express the depth of his heart and the creativity of his mind. On the way home, he hummed the tunes he had just played, replaying every note in his memory. Each melody seemed more alive than the last, more full of potential. He could feel the music growing within him, shaping his thoughts, emotions, and dreams. The first touch of the piano had opened a door, and he knew that every step forward would lead to even greater wonders. That night, as he lay in bed, he thought about the caretaker's words, the teacher's guidance, and all the hours of preparation that had led to this moment. He felt a sense of gratitude and humility, understanding that patience, dedication, and passion had brought him here. He closed his eyes, imagining the piano again, and for the first time, he could see himself not just as a boy longing to play, but as a musician ready to share his gift with the world. By the end of part 3, the boy had discovered the joy of creating music for Real. The piano, once a distant dream, was now a living, breathing part of his life. Every note he played carried emotion, imagination, and hard-earned skill. The journey had not been easy, but the first touch had shown him the power of persistence, patience, and the magic that can happen when passion meets opportunity. He was no longer just imagining wonders within the piano. He was creating them. After that first touch, the boy could not stop thinking about the piano. The sound of the keys, the way his fingers felt moving across them, and the melodies he created stayed in his mind constantly. He returned to the community hall as often as he could, sometimes alone, sometimes under the watchful eye of the teacher who had guided him. Every visit was an opportunity to practice, to learn, and to explore new musical ideas. He began to spend more time experimenting. He tried different tempos, soft and gentle at times, faster and lively at others. He explored the lower notes, creating deep, rich sounds, and the higher ones, producing bright, sparkling tones. Each new combination felt like unlocking a new secret of the piano, and he quickly learned that the instrument responded to emotion as much as skill. He could make the music feel sad, happy, calm, or playful, and the realization thrilled him. The boy's confidence grew. He started composing his own small pieces, taking inspiration from the world around him. He imagined the sound of raindrops as a delicate rhythm on the keys, the rustling leaves as soft, flowing melodies, and the laughter of children as playful bursts of music. Each composition was a reflection of what he felt, capturing moments of life that were otherwise unspoken. Music became a language for him, one that he could speak with his fingers and share with anyone who listened. The teacher noticed the boy's progress and encouraged him to perform in small recitals at the community hall. The first time he played for an audience, he was nervous. Friends, neighbors, and family members filled the room, watching as he approached the piano. His hands trembled slightly as he placed them on the keys, but as soon as the first note sounded, a wave of calm washed over him. The music flowed naturally, as it always did in his imagination, and the audience listened in awe. They were moved by the depth and emotion in his playing, sensing the story he was telling without words. People began to recognize the boy's talent. The caretaker, once wary and cautious, now allowed him more time with the piano, acknowledging the dedication and skill he displayed. Other musicians and teachers in the community started offering guidance, helping him refine his technique and expand his knowledge. The boy absorbed everything eagerly, always learning, always practicing, and always imagining new music. Each lesson was a step toward mastery, but more importantly, each step was a way to express himself and connect with others through sound. He learned the importance of balance, understanding that music was not just about speed or complexity, but about feeling and timing. He practiced slowly at first, ensuring that every note was precise and every melody conveyed the emotion he intended. Then he experimented with improvisation, letting his heart guide his fingers. He discovered that the most beautiful moments often came from unexpected combinations, the spontaneous choices that brought life and energy to the music. His compositions grew longer and more intricate. He explored different styles, mixing classical harmonies with modern rhythms, playful melodies with gentle, emotional passages. Each piece was a reflection of his world, capturing experiences, feelings, and memories. He shared these compositions with his teacher, who praised his creativity and encouraged him to continue. The boy felt proud, not just of the music itself, but of the journey it represented, the months of patience, practice, and imagination that had brought him here. With growing recognition came new opportunities. He was invited to perform at local events, small concerts, and gatherings. Each performance was a chance to connect with an audience, to share the emotions that lived inside him, and to inspire others with his music. He noticed the reactions of listeners, the smiles, the tears, the quiet moments of reflection, and understood that music had the power to touch hearts and change perspectives. This realization motivated him even more, fueling his dedication and creativity. He also began mentoring younger children who were curious about music. He showed them simple techniques, shared the joy of imagination, and encouraged them to explore their own creativity. Through teaching, he discovered new insights about his own playing. Understanding that explaining concepts allowed reinforced his knowledge and deepened his connection to the piano. Helping others created a sense of community and purpose, making his musical journey even more meaningful. Despite growing attention and praise, the boy remained humble. He remembered the long months of waiting and imagining, the times he had practiced without an instrument, and the quiet encouragement of his teacher. These memories grounded him, reminding him that talent alone was not enough. Dedication, patience, and love for music were equally important. He continued to practice daily, always seeking to improve, but never losing sight of the joy that had drawn him to the piano in the first place. He experimented with expressing different emotions through his music. Joyful tunes were bright and lively, flowing like laughter across the keys. Sad melodies were slower and softer, touching the listener with quiet intensity. He discovered how to create tension and resolution, how to build excitement and then release it, and how to tell stories entirely through sound. Each new exploration deepened his understanding of music and his ability to connect with others. His compositions started gaining attention beyond the community hall. Recordings of his performances were shared, and people from nearby towns came to listen. The boy felt a mixture of excitement and responsibility, knowing that his music could reach and inspire a wider audience. He approached this new attention with care, continuing to focus on the integrity and emotion of his playing rather than seeking fame or recognition. He also began collaborating with other musicians, experimenting with duets and small ensembles. Working with others taught him the importance of listening, adapting, and blending his music with different instruments and styles. He discovered that collaboration could create new dimensions of sound, enriching his compositions and expanding his creative horizons. Each session brought challenges, discoveries, and moments of joy, reinforcing his love for the endless possibilities of music. Throughout this time, he continued to compose his own pieces, often inspired by personal experiences. A rainy afternoon might inspire a gentle, flowing melody, while a sunny day with friends playing outside could become a lively, playful tune. He wrote down his compositions carefully, creating a growing collection of music that represented his journey, his emotions, and his growth as a young musician. By the end of part 4, the boy had transformed from a dreamer longing to touch a piano into a young musician with talent, skill, and recognition. His music had become a bridge between imagination and reality, connecting him to others and allowing him to share his inner world. He had learned that perseverance, patience, and love for the craft could overcome obstacles, and that the joy of creation was its own reward. The piano was no longer just an instrument. It was a voice for his heart, a companion in his journey, and a testament to the wonders that dedication and passion could achieve. The boy had come a long way since the first time he had touched the piano. Every day of practice, every melody imagined and played, had built the foundation for this moment. His skills had grown, his confidence had matured, and his passion for music had deepened. Now, it was time for a performance that would showcase everything he had learned, and more importantly, everything he felt. The community hall was filled with people. Friends, family, neighbors, and music lovers from nearby towns had gathered, excited to hear the boy who had been quietly creating wonders for months. The piano sat at the center of the stage, gleaming under the soft lights, waiting patiently for him. He felt a mixture of excitement and nerves, but he reminded himself that this was the moment he had worked for, the moment where all his patience and dedication would come alive. He approached the piano with a deep breath. As he sat on the bench, he looked out at the audience and saw eager faces, smiling and encouraging. The weight of expectation could have been heavy, but he focused instead on the music inside him, the melodies he had composed and imagined so many times. He placed his fingers on the keys, feeling the familiar smooth surface, and for a brief moment, closed his eyes, letting the music guide him. The first note rang out, pure and clear. The audience was quiet, listening intently, and he felt a wave of calm wash over him. His fingers moved naturally, flowing across the keys with confidence and precision. He played the pieces he had created, each note carrying emotion, telling a story, sharing a part of himself with everyone in the room. Joyful melodies danced like sunlight, soft and gentle tunes whispered feelings of longing, and powerful chords spoke of triumph and hope. As he continued, he felt a connection not just with the piano, but with everyone listening. The music was a bridge between his heart and theirs, conveying emotions that words could never capture. He noticed subtle reactions, the smile of a neighbor, the quiet tear of someone moved by a soft melody, the nod of appreciation from a fellow musician. These responses filled him with energy, motivating him to play with even more feeling and care. He experimented with improvisation during the performance, letting his instincts guide the flow of the music. Sometimes he deviated from his planned compositions, creating spontaneous melodies that surprised even him. Each improvisation brought the room alive, as if the piano itself had become a living partner in the music, responding to his emotions and ideas. He felt free, unburdened, and fully immersed in the joy of creation. After each piece, he paused briefly, letting the notes linger in the air. The silence was filled with anticipation, a quiet appreciation for the journey of sound he had created. Then he continued, moving seamlessly from one composition to the next, each building on the last, each telling a new chapter of the story he had been waiting to share. The audience was captivated, lost in the music, as the boy poured his heart into every key. He remembered the first day he had touched the piano, the weeks of imagination, the hours of silent practice, and the encouragement of his teacher. All of it had led to this moment. He realized that the struggles and refusals he had faced were part of the journey, shaping him into a musician capable of expressing himself fully. The obstacles had not been barriers, but stepping stones, guiding him toward growth and understanding. The performance reached its climax as he played a piece he had composed inspired by his journey. It began softly, reflecting the longing and patience he had felt, then grew in intensity, representing his persistence and discovery. Finally, it soared, full of energy, triumph, and joy, capturing the excitement of finally being able to create and share his music freely. Each note was deliberate, each pause meaningful, and each melody a reflection of the path he had walked. When the last note faded, the room was silent for a heartbeat, as if the audience itself was catching its breath. Then applause erupted, filling the hall with warmth and celebration. People stood, clapping and cheering, some wiping away tears, others smiling with admiration. The boy felt a rush of emotion, pride and gratitude mingling within him. He had not just played the piano. He had connected, inspired, and shared a part of himself through music. The caretaker, who had once refused him the chance to touch the piano, approached him with a smile. "You have brought this instrument to life," he said quietly, full of respect. The boy thanked him, understanding that the moment was not only about the music, but also about the journey, the people who had guided and believed in him, and the lessons he had learned along the way. After the performance, teachers, musicians, and music enthusiasts approached him, offering guidance, praise, and encouragement. Some invited him to collaborate on new projects, others to perform in different venues. Each opportunity was exciting, a new chapter waiting to be written. He felt humbled but ready, knowing that the first public performance was only the beginning of a lifelong journey with music. The boy also remembered the importance of sharing and teaching. He continued mentoring younger children, showing them the beauty of music, encouraging their creativity, and passing on the lessons he had learned. He wanted others to feel the same joy and freedom he experienced when playing, to understand that music could be a voice for their hearts, and that dedication and passion could open doors even when they seemed closed. Over time, he composed more intricate pieces, blending different styles, experimenting with harmonies, and exploring new rhythms. Each composition was a reflection of his experiences, emotions, and growth. He kept journals of his music, noting inspirations, feelings, and techniques, creating a record of his journey that could guide him and inspire others. His music was no longer just an escape or a dream. It was a living part of his life, shaping who he was and what he wanted to share with the world. Despite the recognition and applause, the boy remained grounded. He remembered the long months of waiting, practicing without an instrument, and imagining melodies in silence. Those experiences had shaped him, teaching patience, observation, and the value of perseverance. He knew that success was not only about talent, but about dedication, love for the craft, and the willingness to keep going even when the world said no. One day, he was invited to perform at a larger venue, a concert hall with many seats and a wider audience. The invitation was a testament to his growing reputation, and he felt a mixture of excitement and nervousness. Yet, as he approached the grand piano on that stage, he remembered all the steps that had led him here, the quiet days of imagination, the first touch of the keys, the encouragement of his teacher, and the countless hours of practice. He understood that this was another opportunity to share his music, to express himself, and to inspire others. As he played in the larger hall, he felt the music fill the space, reaching the ears and hearts of everyone present. The melodies carried stories of hope, patience, and triumph, resonating with people in ways that words never could. He noticed the smiles, the tears, and the attentive faces, and he felt a deep connection with his audience. Music had become a bridge between his soul and theirs, a way to communicate emotions and experiences without speaking a single word. By the end of the performance, the applause was thunderous. People rose to their feet, cheering and clapping, and the boy felt a sense of fulfillment he had never known before. He realized that the piano, once a distant dream, had become an extension of himself, a partner in expressing the beauty and complexity of life. He had transformed longing and imagination into art, and in doing so, he had touched the hearts of many. The journey had taught him lessons that went beyond music. He understood patience, perseverance, creativity, and the power of following one's passion. He knew that obstacles were not meant to stop him, but to guide him toward growth. He realized that true success came from dedication, humility, and the willingness to share one's gifts with the world. The piano was no longer a symbol of what he lacked, but a testament to what he had achieved and what he could continue to achieve. As he walked home that evening, he reflected on his journey. The first time he had seen the piano, the refusals, the imagination, the practice, and the small victories, all of it had led to this moment of triumph and connection. He smiled, feeling gratitude for everyone who had guided, supported, and believed in him. He knew that this was only the beginning, and that the piano would continue to be his companion, his voice, and his way of sharing wonder with the world. By the end of part 5, the boy had completed a journey from longing to mastery, from imagination to expression. He had transformed his dreams into reality, his passion into art, and his perseverance into recognition and joy. The piano had become a part of him, a tool to express his heart and inspire others. His story was a testament to the power of patience, dedication, and love for one's craft, showing that even the greatest barriers could be overcome when passion and determination meet opportunity.